Welcome to the video on self-monitoring, a strategy that falls within the teaching section of the Prevent, Teach, Respond framework. Recall that strategies within the teaching section address this question: how can we use effective teaching techniques to teach new and replacement behaviors? Self-monitoring increases an individual's awareness of a particular behavior so they can learn to take responsibility for their own behavior and control what they do. Think about a time that you may have used self-monitoring, maybe for improving health by increasing the number of steps taken each day or making healthier food choices. Maybe you monitored your screen time on various devices. What contributed to the success or failure of your self-monitoring? So why use self-monitoring with students? Well, some students are also not aware of their own actions. I had a friend ask me one day if my jaw hurt, and I was confused. She said, "Well, you are cracking your gum really loudly, and you don't typically do that." I had no clue. Same is true for students. Some of these behaviors may arise out of impulsiveness or anxiety, and if they aren't aware of their behaviors and are getting in trouble for them, they may perceive themselves as irresponsible, distractible, or bad. Students may see these problems as a result of who they are rather than the result of actions they have taken. Self-monitoring can be very empowering for students to gain control of their behavior. Self-monitoring is not simply a self-evaluation checklist, and it should definitely not be punitive. Self-monitoring involves two processes. The first is data collection. The student learns how to observe and collect data on their own behavior, preferably the behavior we want to increase. The second process is accuracy. The teacher practices the self-monitoring with the student until they accurately self-monitor at 80% or more agreement with the teacher. The process of self-monitoring and the targeted social skill we want to increase are taught simultaneously to fluency, and both must be reinforced. Let's look at some examples, a couple in which all the students in the entire class were self-monitoring the same behaviors, and a couple of individual student monitoring. The first is a 5-point report out that was used to monitor how well students were engaging in newly taught learner behaviors during instruction. At various times throughout the day during instruction, the teacher would say freeze. Students were to write down a number representing how many of the 5 behaviors they were demonstrating. At the same time, the teacher was recording numbers for students too. If there was any student rating that was discrepant from her own rating, she would provide brief private feedback to those students. Students graphed their own data, and the teacher provided reinforcement to individual students and to the class as a whole. The second classroom example, the 3rd grade class has been taught the behavior of using a positive phrase, such as "you bet," when asked to do something, instead of responding with negative and disrespectful comments. Teams were awarded points every time a student on the team used their group phrase and began to follow the direction. After several days of success, the teacher moved the groups into self-monitoring. Each team was assigned 2 recorders who made tally marks on their own data sheet every time a team member replied to the teacher request with the positive phrase and followed the direction. The recorders on each team compared their tallies at lunch and at the end of the day. The team received extra points for being within 2 tallies of each other. Self-monitoring is often used for individual students. This was a self-monitoring form used with a 4-year-old preschool student. He was working on keeping his hands in his lap or to himself during any group floor activity like calendar, story time, academic instruction. Every time a small bell dinged, if he was not touching another student, he was to color in a Batman. Because he loved Batman, coloring it in was highly reinforcing, and this very impulsive 4-year-old quickly became motivated to fill pages with colored-in Batmans as quickly as he could. The teacher charted how many Batmans were colored in at the end of every preschool session and made a Batman chart to track his data. And lastly, this was for a student who was self-monitoring her voice volume. She was into Pokemon, and when she entered class and during class, she would indicate whether she was using an Arcanine voice, a Pokemon fire type with a loud voice, or Metapod, a meek and quiet bug grass type. You can see her long-term goal was for 100% of Metapod voice when entering class and during class. Again, the teacher completed the same form and compared to ensure accuracy. Self-monitoring is a flexible strategy that is usually simple to create and can be tailored to address specific student needs. In summary, it is important to come to consensus with the student on the definition of the target behavior, develop a simple self-monitoring form, set a goal for and with the student, and provide consistent reinforcement for correctly recording the behavior and for meeting the goal. Self-monitoring can equip students to assume greater responsibility and become more active participants in their own learning.